What is up, guys? It's your boy Kyger back with another Hypixel skyblock video. In this video, we're going to be comparing Terminator to Hyperion. Now, obviously, like, I'm poor. Right? I don't have a Hyperion. But that doesn't mean I can't really explain which one is better, for what reasons, what are they useful for, etc. Now, I don't think it's a surprise to anyone that Hyperion just simply does not match up with a Terminator when it comes to just raw DPS inside of dungeons. But when we take things outside of dungeons, Hyperion absolutely annihilates Terminator in DPS. Now, why is that? There's a pretty simple reason for it, and it's literally just because cata levels scale stronger with a Terminator. Now, why is that? Well, essentially, if we look at the way cata levels work, it multiplies every single individual stat by a certain percentage. Now, at first, you might just think, okay, well, I get 15% more stats, that means my damage increases by 15%. But that would be just false. It increases the base damage of your weapon by 15%, your crit damage by 15%, and your strength by 15%. So overall, you would increase your damage by approximately 15% to the third power. So 1.15 to the third, which is significantly more than just 1.15. Now, the reason that Terminator becomes better than Hyperion in DPS at a higher cata level is because it has 3 variables that are scaled by this equation instead of 2. And at first, initially, I was going to do some math to, like, actually explain the formula and show why this would work. But I soon realized that it wouldn't actually be that simple for a couple reasons. One of them is because there's just too many variables. It wouldn't apply because this cata level scales differently for everyone, depending on gear. And 2, because a significant amount of your stats don't come from things that are scaled directly, like, by dungeons, and it also changes differently depending on what class you're playing. For example, Mage got massively juiced up in the Nether update with things like Mana Pool and the addition of certain reforges like Sighted and Bizarre as, like, just straight up Talisman powers, which gave a ridiculous amount of intelligence. But the thing is, none of that is scaled by your cata level, so a large fraction of your damage isn't multiplied by cata level, meaning that you can't just simply plug it into equation where you have your base damage outside of dungeons multiplied by 5.65, which would be the cata level bonus of cata 50, and then multiply that by Master Star bonus to the power of how many variables you're adding for each cata level. That just wouldn't work because about half of your damage comes from other things like talismans and, like, gear that isn't affected by actual dungeon level as well. But then if we look at, like, Mage, for example, you get a ridiculous amount of intelligence that just doesn't get scaled, so it'd be difficult to calculate the actual difference. But pretty much, to put it as simply as possible, the higher your cata level is, the weaker Hyperion will be in proportion to Terminator. However, Hyperion is still an incredibly valuable utility weapon. Well, not exactly Hyperion itself. You would want either a Scylla or an Estrella, because, well, they're just better for the whole point of Wither Shield. The higher and higher you go, the more Hyperion kind of just turns into, like, a healing item and, like, a utility item. I know, for example, that, like, when I run M4 with, like, Kev and them, they all, like, RCM clear, but if I'm not mistaken, I believe they all use an Estrella, not a Hyperion. Yeah, Kev uses an Estrella, and so, yeah. Pretty much, Estrella is just, like, better for RCM clear in Master Mode, because you'll probably die if you use a Hyperion. Unless you're, like, using a Chimera or a Hyperion with, like, a tank pet, but that's kind of stupid. The only way you're going to get away with using a Hyperion is if you have a Sub-Zero Wisp, and that's, like, 3 people in the entire server, so that's a thing. But pretty much, the way that cata level works, it's also why left-click Mage is only good when you're at a really high cata level. Testimony from a Cata 53 friend of mine, Astral. I asked him a couple days ago, I'm like, hey, about how much damage would you say you can get by, like, just, like, slapping a trash mob with your Claymore as left-click Mage? And he was like, about integer limit. And I'm like, okay. Well, that's cool, because if we look at, like, clips of, like, Kata 50s playing RCM clear on, like, M7, they do, like 20 million per right-click of trash mobs. They'd have to right-click 100 times per second for that to match a singular mage beam in terms of DPS. And that's, like, literally not possible, because a while back the admins put a soft cap. Not a soft cap, I guess it's kind of a hard cap, but they basically made it so that you can only right-click at a maximum of, like, 8, I think it's 8 times with a Hyperion, because people would, like, macro it to get ridiculous DPS. So they changed that, so then it's max, so, like, it could really only be pushed to, like, 160 million DPS if you're, like, mentally insane. Then I guess you could do that, which is kind of pointless, but yeah. And then there's Terminator, which can push, like, a solid 100 mil per shot and fire, like, you know, 40 arrows a second. But yeah, that's a thing. The thing is, left-click mage is still usually better for just straight-up DPS against most Master Mode bosses, because, well, I mean, it's pretty difficult to chain shots with a Terminator on most bosses, so, like, you have to spend time knockbacking with, like, Livid and Professor, so it's like, a lot faster to just have a left-click mage, like 3-shot them. Like in Phase 2, or in, like, M5. Like, ever since the change to the way the M5 boss works, I think it's actually faster to just, like, have a left-click mage, just, like 5-shot Livid if you have a Kata 50. You know, obviously, if you don't have a Kata 50, then you just knock them into a portal, but that's, like, the only exception. If you do have a really high Kata player, you just kind of want to hit him in the face, because they made Livid's aggro really weird now. So it's, like, a lot more confusing to do the actual boss fight, which is really annoying. But yeah, when it comes to the comparison, right, Terminator is, like, definitely, if you like dungeons and you do a lot of dungeons, Terminator is just better for you than Hyperion. If you don't really care that much about dungeons, then, well, you have literally no reason to ever own a Terminator. It has one use, and it's dungeons. It's kind of pointless everywhere else. I mean, like, I get it's a okay budget option against some of the Nether minis. Like, it can kill Mage Outlaw pretty fast. But Blade Soul's hitbox is way too small for it to be effective, so it doesn't really matter. So you kind of just want to... Yeah, Terminator's really only good for dungeons. Hyperion is far more versatile and valuable for a lot more things, especially since the Nether update. It's pretty much, like, the meta for everything except for dungeons. You know, like, it's the best way to do Kudra, it's the best way to do Nether minis, it's the best way to do Ashfang, it's the best way to do Void Glooms, it's the best way to do Diana. It's pretty much, it's even the best thing for Nether fishing. Like, there's pretty much nothing in this game that Hyperion isn't the best thing for, except for Master Mode. Master Mode is, like, the one place where Hyperion it's not it. You don't want to use Hyperion in Master Mode. You want to use a Scylla or an Estrella, and then shoot stuff with your Terminator. Or you can get, like, a Chimera 5 Claymore and just, like, one-shot everything. But that's kind of impractical, because then you'd have to, like, manually hit everything, which sucks. But it's good for mini bosses, so that's cool. So yeah, Hyperion's kind of useless in Master Mode, but everywhere else, it's kind of overpowered. So, like, overall, Hyperion is probably better than a Terminator for most players. Like, if you're a casual player, Hyperion is definitely more worth it than Terminator, because Terminator's one use is, like, the sweatiest thing in Skyblock, which is just, like, high levels of Master Mode. So if you're just a casual player, then a Hyperion is definitely better for you. And the good thing is that the price of handles are finally starting to drop after the the RNG meter update, if I check Necron's handles, for the longest time they were like well over 1 billion coins, like standing strong at over 1 bill. And, you know, they're down to a solid, like, clean just over 900 million coins. Like, there's not a single handle on AH for 1 bill. And Hyperion... Even Hyperion itself is under 1 bill. So Terminator and Hype are both dropping in price, which is great if you don't like having to sweat constantly. But yeah, I'd say overall, you should probably get a Hyperion instead of a Terminator. I did not take my own advice because, well, I dropped a core. So I kind of just used it to make a Terminator. But, we're getting the Hype eventually. Subscribe for more. 250 subs, 25 mil giveaway. Yes. Like, subscribe. Bye.